Welcome to Toot or Boot. I am your host, Stacey Nordwall. We're going to get into some good toots and boots today and talk about some current events. And with me, I'm excited to bring Erica Spitale, funny, smart, just all around wonderful HR person. Erica, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Stacey. It's so good to see you. So good to be back. Love this. You took a healthy break and I'm so happy for you for it, but happy to be part of your resurgence.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm excited because we're going to do, I feel I'm always saying this, that we're going to do something a little bit different, but we are going to do something a little bit different because I think in the past I've had some very good, but very much more structured conversations. And in talking with you, I love that we generally just pull all of these different threads. I love that you also have this background in psychology, which brings a lot of texture to the conversations. And so I want this to be just a little bit more free form. So I'm excited to just basically chat with you.
I love it. Yeah, that's my jam. So I'm happy to be here to do that with you.
Awesome. So we talked about this before we started recording, but I went to see Michelle Buteau last night. She's on her Surviving and Thriving, aptly named tour, stand-up tour this year. And one of her opener had said, I went to sleep and I woke up and we were at war and I ran. And I feel like, right, it was this collective recognition, I think, in the audience of, yeah, that's how things feel and things happen these days, where we went to sleep and we wake up in a different world, or when something significant has happened. And how do we process that? Because here I'm back to work on a Monday, pushing along, trying to focus. I think that's the experience a lot of people are having. And we know that at this point in this war, some US service members have already died. Articles have already started to come out about, okay, gas prices are going to rise, grocery prices are going to rise. And so when affordability is already a problem for people are coming to work on Monday with all of that, which might be more on the surface, underneath the surface, but all of those things are there. People are coming with those concerns into work. And it made me think about something that you had said, which was how sometimes disengagement in the workplace is often more about a nervous system response than it is about a lack of care in the workplace. And how there is also this need to make space for the feelings and emotions that people are bringing to work, but also create boundaries in a way around that. So I really wanted to just dig into that with you. I think especially that idea, because we hear as HR folks a lot around disengagement, but if disengagement is really people just almost being self-protective in a way, what can we really do about that? You know what I mean? So I just want to toss it over to you. What were you, when you said that line, which I felt was so powerful too, what were you even thinking about? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I feel, even with a psychology background and then transitioning into the workplace, you actually sometimes forget because you're so hyper focused on the work side of things, and your brain doesn't always naturally see work and humanity
Mm,
as a marriage. And it absolutely is. And I think that's what's so challenging, because the conversation tends to lead with the productivity side or the turnover side. And then maybe down the line you get to, oh, okay, well then how is that person feeling? Or what kind of conversations were you having? It seems to be an afterthought versus a joint thought or conversation. And so for me, when I am more aware of it and the way I was thinking about it, I was like, yeah, disengagement isn't a lack of concern. It's me protecting me from what either I'm not experiencing and need to be experiencing, or what I'm not seeing and need to be seeing. And it has more to do with, I don't feel safe. If you think about what engagement means, it is the sense of an invitation to be oneself in a moment or in an environment or whatever. And to do that, it requires safety. It requires a sense of belonging. It requires a sense of feeling your inclusion in this environment or space is actually desired and wanted. And so Yeah, disengagement is me saying my radars are going up and I'm not seeing that or I'm not feeling that. So I am going to protect me from whatever feels threatening and not engage. So
Yeah.
yeah, and so it's a lot of times do we talk about disengagement as this attitude problem, or something that is, what's the word I'm looking
It's
for?
always an individual one, not a structural
Yes.
one.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm just going to opt out today. Like, yeah, you can, but that's not the real definition of disengagement. Yes, of course, we all make choices and have the option to opt in or opt out. At the same time, if we're truly talking about the essence of engagement versus disengagement, it is, yeah, it is not an individual problem. It is very much something that's missing from the system or missing from the environment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, that is perfect. I think you've conveyed it so well that people really, I mean, if they felt, for example, with the things going on recently, that they could come into work and say, I'm worried about XYZ thing. You could pick any number. There are any number of things that you could bring into that, or say, I'm doing my best, but I'm not all here today because I'm worried about this or that thing, or I have a family member who's going abroad, whatever it is. That would be one thing. But I feel a lot of people don't feel that they can come in and do that. And so they are putting that boundary in place for themselves. And then there is that narrative, like you say, that is some kind of attitude thing, as opposed to a recognition of someone does not feel the trust and safety to acknowledge or say those things. Or they think if they do, it's going to be perceived as an attitude problem, or it's going to be perceived as disloyalty or whatever weird thing that people tend to perceive it as.
Yeah. And I love that you said that too, because what you just made me think about is our bodies will say it long before our mouth will.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And to your point, depending on where you're at, where you work, you may never say it, but your body doesn't lie, right? Your body will respond accordingly.
That is so true. It's funny that you say that because I think almost all this weekend, I felt funky. I felt a real heaviness in my chest that I didn't even have necessarily a conscious awareness of where it was coming from, but I absolutely felt it.
Mhm. Yeah. And then the onus is on us. So if I think about tiered process of humanity, where the onus is on us to take it to the next level to say, okay, am I going to be aware of this? And then am I going to try to figure out where this is, like, why? Right. And then what I can be actively doing to, again, self protect or trudge forward or whatever the decision is for the person. But yeah, it requires but the baseline is your body, and your body doesn't lie.
That's so true. And one of things I'm thinking about as you're saying this, it's one of the conversations that I've seen a lot on LinkedIn, and I think come as HR folks, as internal comms folks, people within the org have to think about, when do we talk about these things? When do we acknowledge them and bring them into the space? And I've seen a lot on LinkedIn where people will say, "Hey, your people are not okay today. They're dealing with their response to this thing." And I think I've started to feel a little bit, I don't know, two ways about it, where one, there is that whole thing of, when do we acknowledge it? When, as you said, do we make space for these emotions, but also create boundaries around them? So I think there is that aspect. The other aspect is, sometimes I feel, I don't know, I just want to come into work on autopilot mode and I don't want to think about it. And is that okay too? Can we make space for people using it as an escape? Or just like, this is my place to shut out the world in a way and get some sense of normalcy here. So I feel like both of those things are pulling at me.
Yeah. I love that you said that, because I think one of the things, if motherhood has taught me the most about, is living in the world of both and.
Mm.
hard stop, full stop, and all the parents out there will know exactly what I'm talking about. But this is very similar. What you're talking about is very similar. And I think that's also what makes it so challenging because one, here's what I'll also say that you mentioned. When we talk about disengagement and it being this nervous system response and the body not lying, I think what we also have to recognize too as individuals sitting in within systems and organizations is that to assume the organization knows what you are individually tackling or going through is unfair.
Yeah.
At the same time, and it's also incumbent on the organization or the system to recognize that you are hiring people and it is likely on a spectrum, right? So it's not all our people don't feel this and all our people feel this or whatever.
Yeah.
So your point about these kind of two conflicting things, yeah, that can be the truth. And that usually is the truth. And so then how are we showing up in the middle of those two conflicts or in the middle of those two differing sides of the spectrum where, yes, you're going to have people who feel but want to engage fully because they don't want to feel. And that's their prerogative and allow them to do that. And then you're going to have people who feel but need to disengage as an outcome of those feelings. And then how do we support them too? So it's a both, and it's challenging because both require different things. And then if you tackle on that, potentially a lack of safety or trust in that environment, so you're not verbally hearing that, you're making a lot of assumptions. And so you're tackling problems in the dark, hoping that something sticks or that you hit the bullseye and really just kind of, rolling with it in a way that feels even more challenging than it likely has to be, but it just is by the nature of where you are. So I love that you said that. But I think, also the introduction of feelings, I think we are long past the days of feelings not being a part of work, among many other things.
Yeah.
Because listen, I think at the end of the day, the reality is we're at a workplace with humans who spend a crap ton of their time at this place. And so that means you are asking people to bring elements of themselves that you are not responsible for, whether that's the emotional side, the social side, the cognitive side, whatever it is. We are always going to be complicated and we are always going to be multi-layered. So how do we just bite the bullet and accept that and then figure out what that means for your specific workplace based on who is in your workplace? I think the other thing I'll also say to what you said is we tend to we tend to talk about emotions at work as if they're distractions. That's not to say they can't be distracting. So hear me clearly, right? Emotions can absolutely be distracting if we are unable to leverage them to do something with them. But to talk about emotions as a concept, as if they, like you said, don't have a place or as if they're distracting from what this place is intended to do is so reckless because emotions come with a lot of data. It's just how you are navigating and like leveraging it to use it in a way that actually benefits what you're trying to get out of this place.
Pace of change in the world of business is fast, and that drives incredible complexity for the world of human resources.
Welcome to the HR Data Lab's Brown Bag Lunch, a series of conversations with experts inside and outside the world of human resources on how to innovate, measure, and evolve our practices.
Our goal is to help provide you with practical examples of how HR has to change and to meet in this complex business environment.
Every week, we'll talk to new and different voices on all aspects of human resources.
And guess what? You get to chat with us live.
Live?
Live.
So they can answer questions or they can ask us questions.
They can ask, they can answer, whatever they want. They get to talk with us live.
That's awesome.
Sometimes we geek out on the data and technology that underlie the processes that drive the world of HR.
But the conversations are always insightful and fun. So please enjoy the HR Data Lab's Brown Bag Lunch.
I love that last bit, like emotions come with data. Can you expand on that more so?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, I also think okay, if you think about emotions, right? Like, why do we even have them in the first place? And not to get like super meta or philosophical, but at the end of the day, if you think about who you are as an individual and how things make you feel at any given time, whether that's, the highs of the highs, the lows of the lows, or even just that middle ground, they tell you or they signify for you like what matters to you. We don't tend to feel things about things that don't matter to us, right? We tend to always say like, I don't care, right? And you hopefully mean that, which means you are not having a response or a reaction to something. But they tell us about what matters. So if I'm running a business, that's a data point. I want to know what matters to my employees, to my teammates, to my leaders, whatever the case may be. It's also, again, if not navigated or managed in a way that is productive, it can tell us where friction exists. Because depending on what you're having feelings about, and if those feelings match others or seem to be different than others, it can really help us understand where friction is happening. Okay, let's go fix that, right? Let's go to the source. And then again, it also just tells us what needs attention. And so I feel if we talk about feelings as if they're a distraction, we wind up implicitly saying, let's suppress them. Instead of saying, let's acknowledge and then do something about it and let's action right towards them. Instead of just letting emotions sit as emotions, let's let emotions actually help guide us towards what the pain points, what the friction points, what the challenges, what matters, what doesn't is, so that we're not spinning our wheels unnecessarily.
Yeah. And I have to say, as you're saying some of these things, I have, if you know Tara Turkanes, in the back of my mind saying, feelings aren't facts. So that is, I feel like that's also an element to what you're saying too, where, okay, feelings are data. It does tell us things about what's important to people. And maybe what you are alluding to in this terms of what boundaries get put around that, how you still make decisions, knowing the information of feelings is the facts part. What is that? What of that is facts? And some translation there. I don't know. Maybe that's not what you are thinking about in terms of the boundaries, but I just she has that I have the Tara in my head saying feelings are facts.
I love that you said that. And I have not had the pleasure of meeting Tara, but I'm familiar with her. I'm so glad you brought her name up in the conversation. I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. Feelings aren't facts, but they are data.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point around boundaries, absolutely. Because they're not facts, because they are data points, they tell part of the story. They don't tell the whole story. And so when it comes to making decisions about anything organizationally, it's about, okay, data, what do we do with data normally? We recognize data, we reflect on data, and we respond to data. But that doesn't mean we fix or avoid, right? And so feelings, that's why I intentionally use the word guide. They don't make the decision for us, but they guide us. They at least give us some direction.
Yeah.
To decide, not letting them be the deciding factor.
Yeah.
Which, I think in the real world, that's easy to say, harder to do, but needs to be done as consistently as possible, when possible.
Yeah. And the thing I'm thinking about as we're having this discussion and what you just said was that, especially in the past couple of years, I think we've seen companies pull back from things like DEI. We've seen companies say that, we're not political. We don't discuss politics at work. And I think that this is kind of an interesting tie-in because there is no neutrality, right? So just because they say that doesn't mean people aren't coming in with feelings about things, right? And so I'm not even sure what my question is, but I'm just wondering, what do you think about this kind of how do those maybe butt up against each other, where you have this company that these companies that maybe are trying to avoid doing some of the things that you're talking about. They're trying to avoid getting the data from those feelings and guiding what they're doing and just stepping back and saying well, we don't do that here.
I think the first thing I'd say is good luck. I don't know how you do that successfully, honestly. And I would love to talk to people, at organizations who are doing that successfully, not to mimic, but to just understand. But I think the first thing I would say is good luck.
I mean, I don't think they are doing it.
Yeah.
But that's another story.
Yeah, totally another conversation. But I would definitely say good luck, because when I think about it, I do think too many organizations are trying to, as we talked about a little bit earlier, extract the humanity from the workplace in the vein of productivity or whatever business term you want to use. But the reality is, like, newsflash, humanity is the condition that makes productivity sustainable.
Mm.
It's not an either or. Like, you literally need both to exist. You don't have sustainable productivity without humanity.
Say more about that.
Yeah, like, oh gosh. I mean, I'm trying not to like oversimplify it because it is hard to do.
Mm.
But I mean, to me, it's like a simple math equation. Like, unless your organization runs solely on robots,
Which they're trying to make it.
I know, and that's why I said, listen, let's just go. Please let me know. But until that day happens, if you even just have one employee, there is no sustainable way to not embed humanity into your productivity model.
Mm.
And I feel like a lot of this also centers around trust, which I think you could talk about in the sphere of feelings at work too. And so, like, when I talk about humanity, I mean it in the sense of like endless access. Like, just because you employed someone does not mean you deserve endless access to them. It does not mean they owe you emotional labor without boundaries, right? It does not mean they owe you performing wellness while burning out. Like, there are just so many like misconceptions about what employment contracts mean these days. And so that's what I mean by you don't get sustainable productivity without humanity, because you don't get to treat people any less than human and still expect these outcomes, whatever your outcomes may be. And that's why I say good luck, because you can try, but like, good luck.
I feel like I'm like, that was a whole word. Because I mean, because I feel like that's what so many companies really are trying to do in a way. They really are trying to ignore people's humanity and think that they're entitled to all of these things. And when I think about seeing again kind of the rise of this, what is it, like 996 culture, where I'm just like, oh Lord, have we learned nothing yet? Why are people still trying to do this? Like, why is it that some organizations are still trying to treat people as though they are not people, as though they are assets or resources, right? Whatever it is, not humans. And like you said, humans are messy. They come with all kinds of things that they are bringing into the workplace, and you don't get access to those things if you don't treat them as humans, and you don't get access to those things without letting them bring their humanity into the workplace.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I think what you make me think of too when we're talking about this is just what appears to be, like, in reading outside sources, whether that's LinkedIn articles or what have you, the kind of the narrative, like the rise of demands of employees. And it's just an interesting, like, and depending on what you're reading, what angle they take with it. But I always kind of like, I don't want to say cringe, but like I have a reaction when I read the narratives that are more angled towards like what's being asked is outrageous. Now, I'm not saying it can't get there, because absolutely that is very much a possibility, and it may be a reality versus a possibility for some folks. But what we're talking about is something we shouldn't have to be talking about. Like, it's something that when we decided work needed to be a thing for everyone in some way, shape, or form, that we should have figured out then versus still talking about it now.
Hi there, I'm Peter Zollman. I'm a co-host of the Inside Job Boards and Recruitment Marketplaces podcast.
And I'm Stephen Rothberg, and I guess that makes me the other co-host.
Every other week, we're joined by guests from the world's leading job sites.
Together, we analyze news about general, niche, and aggregator job board and recruitment marketplaces sites.
Make sure you sign up and subscribe today.
I think the one thing that has been circulating around a lot for me is the idea of trust. And I don't know how others are grappling with it, if they're even grappling with it at all. I think based on how we started this conversation, it makes, when I kind of trace it back, it makes a lot of sense why we're talking about it more in the workplace, considering our external environment and what feels incredibly unsafe and uncertain and traumatizing, and like all the words that we're using. So I can wholeheartedly understand why the word trust may come up more, but it has challenged me in ways that I had not anticipated, because I think, one, I think a lot about what we come into the workplace with, not just our identities, but also the relationships that we built with others outside of the workplace, whether that's family, community, etc. And then bringing all of that in and having already predefined definitions of certain words, and then showing up at the workplace under that definition without sometimes understanding what it may mean for where you entered into. And so that's like that paradox. So like, we talk about it, and I think it's like the least clearly defined concept as the world continues to shift and evolve, because I do think that like for the most part, every organization says trust is something they value. But I haven't yet seen this, like, for as much as we talk about it, I haven't really seen like, how are people actually defining it? And like, what does that actually look like in behavioral terms? I feel like we experience it very inconsistently. And which then like makes it easier for us as individuals to say like, oh yeah, no, I don't trust that or this or them, or they don't trust me, or trust doesn't exist here. I think it's the inconsistency is making it very easy to quickly label the presence or absence of, when I would take it a step back and take it a step further by taking a step back and saying, well, how are you defining trust first?
Yeah.
Like, what does trust mean here? And then what does it mean for you? And how do those two definitions either collide or merge in a way that creates a more consistent, trusting experience for you? So it's just been really, really challenging for me in this moment.
I'm thinking, as you were talking about that, everyone, because of all the different experiences they've had, brings a different idea to what trust is, if it's given, if it's earned, in what kind of layers, right? There's a lot of, I think, when we enter a workplace, if you're starting someplace new, you're usually testing the boundaries to see what it is that you can trust, and poking on things here and there to see if words match actions and all of these kinds of things, right? There's a lot of like that kind of testing that happens when you enter an environment to kind of calibrate where you're going to be with your trust levels. And there was something you said about also kind of having a trusting experience, right? Where you might calibrate your trust levels in a certain way. It might be different for you than it is for me, but is there some commonality in the experience that we have of the organization? That's also, I think, pretty fascinating too. And it's because of the fact that given our lenses, given everything we're bringing into it, we can have very different trust levels, but have a similar experience in the organization.
100%. 100%. Yeah. We're all bringing in, to your point, like our own, call it barometer, thermometer, or whatever, right? We have our thresholds, et cetera. And a lot of that has been built before we even step foot into the workplace. If you think about coming into your first job to how your career journey has progressed, we already came in with stuff. We came in, we did. We came in with definitions. We came in with experiences. We came in with knowledge. We came in with interactions, like all the things. And I think like when we talk about like healthy workplace trust, it can be human-centered without lowering accountability. I think a lot of times we get caught up in talking about trust like it's a performance metric, where it's like, oh, gain trust, lost it, went down today. Like the Dow Jones, like went down today, went up today. Like, and it's just like, and it's as funny as that sounds, it's just like, that's such a jarring and whiplashing experience if that is how we are doing the tracking, versus thinking about it, again, harder to do, easier to say, thinking about it more simply to say, like, I'm pairing clear expectations with humane assumptions. So I'm being clear about what this relationship, because That's another thing that I think gets missed in this. Anytime you say yes to a job, you are saying yes to a relationship. Anytime an organization is saying yes to you, they're saying yes to a relationship. You have a relationship with your work, the organization, and the people you work with. There are 3 relationships, huge relationships, that we are all navigating if we say yes to work.
Yeah.
With that, it is, how do I not extract the humanity from it? How do I infuse humanity in it by saying, yes, of course, I have expectations for this relationship. Also recognizing that there are other people involved in this relationship. So how do I embed humane assumptions about what I'm learning about you, what you're learning about me, and how work needs to get done here? You can still have clarity and still have humanity. And it's again, easier to say than to do, but it doesn't mean letting the asylum run itself. You can still have accountability. Like, you can still have guardrails, boundaries, all the language that in some ways signifies rules, but it's really about allowing a lane to be clear so that folks can trust, so that trust is more easily formed. So you're right. It does feel very meta in some ways in talking about it, but it can be operationalized in a way that makes sense for everyone and feels safe for everyone.
Yeah. I think, I mean, as you were saying that, and I don't think it ever like truly crystallized for me before, but it totally makes sense. So the relationships that you're talking about. And I think it also crystallized for me this thought that you can have very good relationships, say, with your team, right? And I feel like this happens a lot of times where people love their team, but the organization, that is where they don't have the trust at all. And there is really this thing, I think a lot of people will almost burn themselves out because of this relationship they have with the team, even if the organization is not giving them a reason to trust or is not recognizing their humanity. And it is a very weird tension there, but it does kind of shed light when you think about it in terms of that, like those different kinds of levels of why people may have these very like complex relationships within their workplace, because there are multiple different kinds of relationships, and you might have trust in one and not in another. And yeah, I think that's a really kind of fascinating way to look at it, and for people to also think for themselves about where they're putting their trust, where maybe they have a defense up and are being more self-protective. Yeah, it feels like a very like complex and nuanced way to think about it.
Yeah. And I love that you added that, because you made me think about our conversation about disengagement and that being a nervous system response. And I think trust is similar in the sense that you and I agree that disengagement is not an individual issue or attitude problem. It is very much a systemic outcome or a systemic issue. And trust, I feel like we talk about as if it's an individual trait, like as it's attached to a person versus being an environmental outcome. So we ask questions like, do I trust this person? Or do people trust me? As if it's tied to one person, instead of asking, have the conditions, or have I created the conditions where trust can reasonably exist?
Yeah.
Then we're talking about something that is more operational, right? Something that is more visible, instead of tying it to one or two or a segment of people, and more around what is happening in the space that we are coexisting in, whether that be virtual or in person, to allow trust to survive.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I feel like we got really deep and philosophical at the end there.
Yes. It's kind of my favorite thing to do. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, I love that. I want to give us a couple of times. We got to round it out. It's toot or boot. We have to give some toots or boots. I will give you a little time to think about yours in case you haven't already. I have 2 boots. They are AI specific boots, which I feel like, if you know me at all, you're not surprised. But so here's my first boot. My first boot I think this is especially because I spend a fair amount of time on LinkedIn. I see a lot of content creators. I get a lot of newsletters. So my boot is for AI content creators who basically tell people like, oh, I just dropped this request in AI, went away from my coffee. It came back. Hours of work were flawlessly executed. Or they say, oh, I just dropped this command into my terminal and it did all of these things with my files. And I'm like, okay, one, you did not flawlessly execute the work. I've never heard anyone say that they just told it to do a thing and it did it perfectly. That is not the experience. Two, don't tell people to put commands into their computer. Like, just don't do it. Because if you're dealing with non-technical people, they have no idea what they've just done, what risk that there has been, what security, breach they might have just made. So I think like if you're going to get out there, you want to be a content creator, you want to promote AI, you want to teach people, great, do that, but give them accurate information and don't tell them to do things that are putting them at risk. Just that is my thing. The other boot, also AI related, I think that even before there's been a lot of news coverage recently about Anthropic because they've refused to let the US military use their tools in certain ways. And that is kind of, I was going to say blowing up. That feels like the wrong term to use, but like that story has been really out there and obviously it's still underway. But it felt like even before some of that, there was a very like, I'm team ChatGPT, OpenAI, I'm team Claude, I'm team Gemini, whatever it was. And what I would say about that is obviously everybody can be, I don't care be whatever team you want to be. But what I would say is if you are team Claude, the least worst option is not necessarily a good option. Be team Claude, love whatever AI you want to love, but always demand more because I think right now, none of them are great options. They're all doing things that they shouldn't be doing. They're not taking a lot of responsibility or accountability for the tools they're creating. And so like what you want to like, but demand more. Demand a good option. So those are I'm off my soapbox. Those aren't even boots. I'm just like, I just want to be mad at people about AI stuff, I guess is what happened. It's okay. Whatever.
It's okay. And this is your show, so you can do whatever you want.
That's right. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to you, Erica. What have you got?
Okay. So I'm going to turn this into a toot. So I know we've been talking a lot about, not you and I, but just generally in the space, talking a lot about the employment crisis, right? And folks in the market for something different, for something new, for survival, for growth, for all the needs. And I know we talk a lot about it where it's scary and it's definitely, and it is. Those are definitely some interesting times. The toot I want to turn that situation into is for organizations who do have the talent for them to and are unable to hire in this environment, in this moment, to turn this into an opportunity to invest in the people they do have. And so with the environment we're in, there definitely can be a need for sourcing outside talent. But in times where there are constraints like this one, how are we using this as an opportunity to turn that into a positive and invest in the capabilities and skills of the people we have to focus and prioritize internal growth versus seeing it as like a loss on all sides. So I wanted to toot that, where I think we talked more about that when times were better. But how do we still talk about that and make that part of the conversation when times are really, really challenging? And whether that's on the org side, because there are budget constraints to hire, or whether that's on the candidate side, looking for opportunities to come in new to an organization. How do we turn this into something positive for those who are currently employed and invest in them in ways that allow them to continue to see growth in their professional development, but also in what the organization needs to continue to be successful. So that was one thing I've been thinking about that's can be toot-worthy side of things. And then I think I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm gonna boot an element of what we talked about earlier in our conversation, which is organizations trying to create sustainable productivity without infusing humanity into it. Like That's just a hard boot. Steel
Yeah.
toe, spikes, all the things on it, all the gadgets, all the things on it to make it hurt really badly.
Yeah, I love that. You cannot have the productivity without the recognizing people's humanity. All right, Erica, thank you so much for joining. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you and kind of just honestly, I was like, let me just sit back and see how your brain works and get the things out, see all the connections you made because I love it. You are so smart and I love talking to you.
Thank you. I don't know. That also sounded like a scary thought. I don't know if I want to invite folks to see how my brain works, but I'm happy to share when it does work, the things that come up for me.
All right, awesome. Thank you for joining and thanks everyone for listening.